should be shooting this way. That way I can see who's, falling asleep. This, to me, is one of the most important classes that I go through, agency. And you guys have all been, how new are you? This week?
My first week, yeah.
That's good. Nobody can top that in here, I know that for sure. So, but I guarantee you, come back 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be a veteran because there'll be somebody newer than you, so it's all good. You learned about agency in pre-licensing. You've learned about agency since you guys have been writing offers. But let's talk a little bit about it. What does the state say about agency? When does it need to be disclosed?
Right away.
Right away does not count.
Before any financial information is disclosed.
Confidential. Before any confidential information is disclosed, you have to talk about agency. Do you think the typical agent does that?
No.
Because why is that? Because where's the bar in real estate?
Low.
And I don't mean the corner bar, but where?
Low.
Bar's down here. Most agents don't talk about agency. A lot of the old timers, my age or older, don't talk about agency. You can use agency to your advantage if you've got the right verbiage, and it's really not that difficult. You really can. Who's gone through this with me before on agency? Al, come on, don't lie to me. You have numerous times. That's good. Kavita, you have too, right?
Yes.
Yes. So the 3 of them. If someone calls you on the phone, let's say you have a sign note, you got a listing, someone calls you on the phone, wants to start talking about real estate. Or let's forget that one. Let's say somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm thinking about listing my home. Do you have to talk about agency?
Yes.
If I call Dave and say, Dave, I want you to come by tomorrow and list my home. Wake up.
You go over there and talk about agency?
I'm asking you, do you have to, if he calls me on the phone and says, okay, can you come over to my house tomorrow? And I'm thinking about listing my home.
I would ask.
I would ask about working with another agent.
How do I go from nobody talking to everybody talking at the same time? Go ahead.
I would ask them if they're working with another agent. First off,
Okay? They say no.
well, then I would discuss agency.
But you have to do it on the phone.
No, I would say not disclosing any confidential information.
That's kind of the answer, but not the answer. I kind of wanted you to say that. The point is, if I just say, I'm running over to Dave's house tomorrow and I'm going to sit down and talk to him about his house, then you're right, I don't have to talk about the phone. But what do you really want to do when you're on the phone?
Get as much information.
You want to get as much information as you can from him, right? You need to figure out, once you go down the path, what's one of the most important things you want to do if I'm in that situation? I want to find out his motivation, right? And if I go down the path of motivation, he's probably going to disclose some confidential information. So, now I'll re-ask the question. If that situation comes up, do you have to disclose it or talk about it?
Yes.
You should be going down the path that you're going to disclose it, talk about agency. Here is the verbiage I want you to use. So going back to your point, they say, no, I'm not working with an agent. Have you talked to any agents? And they say, yeah, I've talked to a couple, and I've got them coming over too. One's coming over Saturday, and one's coming over Sunday. Al? So have any of them talked to you about agency yet?
No.
And that's pretty much the answer I promise you're going to give.
What is that?
Well, let me just tell you, Al, the most important thing, the state feels agency is very important, and it's in your best interest if we talk about agency. Do you think if they've talked to 3 other people and no one's talked about agency, and you use that line, do you think you score brownie points with them?
Yeah.
Because who are you watching out for?
Sure.
You're watching out for them. It's in your best interest that we talk about agency. So let me explain it. So, are you gonna go through 3 pages of stuff on the phone? No. Are you gonna talk about the highlights of agency? Absolutely. By using that line, it's like you've knocked down a wall already. It's in your best interest that we discuss agency. And you hope they say that no one's talked about it, right? Because that makes it even better for you. How many different types of agency are there? Now we're not talking to the client, I'm talking to you guys.
3.
What are they?
There's dual agency.
Okay, you got the hard one.
Buyer and seller.
Buyer and seller. Correct. Buyer and seller are pretty similar, right? One's for the buyer, one's for the seller. Whose choice is it to decide how they're getting represented? It's always the client's, okay? If you can explain agency as well as I can, your job and your transaction will go much smoother. Because if you stumble on agency, I can guarantee you people are gonna have a hard time listening to what you say. Because they're not gonna believe most of what you say. All right, so, we're going to talk about both sides of agency and dual and some other things also. But at the end of the day, we're not going to get into a buyer's agency contract. That will be next week. We'll talk about that. Before you disclose confidential information to a real estate licensee regarding a real estate transaction, you should understand what type of agency relationship you have with that licensee. Notice that is the first line that's on our paper here. This is the state, this is not our disclosure. This is what the state says. Right, just look up at me. Does agency come into effect on all transactions? He's cheating over there, I can see that. He's reading. Does agency, do you have to discuss agency on every transaction if you're an agent?
Yes.
Negative. A real estate transaction is a transaction involving the sale or lease of any legal or equitable interest in real estate consisting of not less than 1 or not more than 4 residential dwelling units, or consisting of a building site for residential units on either a lot as defined in blank as the Land Division Act, or a condominium unit as defined in blank, Section 4 of the Condominium. So, on commercial, if you're doing a commercial lease, do you have to talk about agency?
No.
If you're doing an apartment complex of 6 units, do you have to talk about agency? Are you going to talk about agency?
Yes.
I'm always going to talk about agency. Because then the next step is, I do want to put people into a buyer's agency contract, right? So I want to explain this so I can get to this. Why do you think in commercial dealings or apartment buildings or whatever, the state doesn't require it?
Sublease.
This is my thought. No one's ever told me this. This is my assumption. I believe they think that the buyer or seller are dealing with, you're dealing with a more sophisticated client who is probably going to have an attorney involved in this. Okay, in other words, if Al goes to buy the Renson, pretty confident he's not going to be just dealing with me, are you? Okay, we know.
I don't mean to say that in a derogatory sense.
You will.
You're a nice guy, but this is business.
No, that's exactly right. You can see that it certainly gets a lot more complicated. So they want the public to be protected, but at some point, it's above our pay grade, is what it amounts to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. You guys know what limited service is? You ever heard that term?
Or just some hurt services to a client.
You take them on as a client, let's say on a listing, and you say, I'll do this, this, and this, but I'm not doing everything. That's a limited service. What are we here?
full?
Well, we are a full-service agency. We're gonna do everything we need to do. Limited service may say, I'm gonna put it in the multi-list, and I'll set appointments. But I'm not, that's all I'm doing. I'm not gonna negotiate the deal, I'm not gonna do this. And there's 3 or 4 companies out there. HousePad is one of them. That's the name of the company. And there's a couple other ones that I can't think of
Does
right
one of
now.
them help you sell?
Help you sell, they're not, they're around, but they're not around as much as they used to be. But yes, they were one of the original limited service.
Like a house pad, I mean, I looked at one of their listings, I mean, it costs the buyer a lot of money just to try and get an offer.
It's funny, $4.95 was it?
Yeah.
I just saw one the other day. Probably saw the same thing, same one I was looking at. And they do nothing, okay? Bottom line. And then what's the other one that's out there? Not the company, but the others. It's not limited service, it's,
MLS entry?
look at that, Kavita. From the back room, yes. MLS entry only. Is all I'm doing is you're paying me X, I'm putting it in the MLS. Now, are they paying the other side if someone brings them a deal? They are. But this is where HousePad is a slime bag, and they may pay 1%. We've seen it where they paid like $10. Okay, so people like that need to be broomed. They're ruining our industry. We just have to figure out a way to broom them. All right, the reason I bring that up is an agent providing service under any service provision agreement owes a minimum the following duties to the client. And that's what limited, MLS only, and full service owes these 6 or 7 things. The exercise of reasonable care and skill in representing the client and carrying out the responsibility of the agency relationship, the performance of the terms of the service provision agreement, no matter what they are, you have to follow through on what you're agreeing to. Loyalty to the interest of the client. If you're just MLS entry only, I'm not sure how loyal you are, but that's what you're doing. Compliance with the laws, rules, and regulations of this state and any applicable federal statutes or regulations. In other words, making sure disclosures, doing things you can't discriminate, things like that. Referral of the client to other licensed professionals for expert advice related to the material matters that are not within the expertise of the licensed agent. Remember, you're not an inspector, you're not an attorney, you're a real estate agent. An accounting in a timely manner of all money and property received by the agent which the client has or may have an interest. Confidentiality of all information obtained with the course of the agency relationship unless disclosed with the client's permission or as provided by law, including the duty to not disclose confidential information to a licensee who is not an agent of that client. Anybody have any questions on that? That's what, no matter what company you work for, what you're doing, limited, full service, MLS only, you have to follow those terms. All right? Number 2, a real estate broker or real estate salesperson acting pursuant to a service provision agreement shall provide the following services to his or her clients. When the real estate broker or real estate salesperson representing a seller or lessor, the marketing of the client's property in the manner agreed upon in the service provision agreement. If you're listing it, you've got to make sure you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. Acceptance of delivery and presentation of offers and counteroffers to buyers, sell or lease the client's property on the property or the property the client seeks to purchase or lease. So if you're doing full service, you've got to take care of these, okay? If you're not doing full service, then there's some out there that MLS entry only, it'll flat out tell you, call the seller, negotiate with the seller. So why do people do MLS entry only or limited service? Why do the clients do that?
A lot of them are FSBOs that decide they need to get on the MLS.
Why are they FSBOs?
Because they
They
want
don't want to pay an agent, they want to
They
make
want to
as much as
save
they
money.
can.
They want to save money. Correct. And, you know, you can't blame someone for trying, but we don't like to see them try. Back in the day, before the market crashed. It's pretty much the same way now. Do you guys see a lot of FSBOs out there now? I still don't, which is kind of, now, I don't know if I'm not seeing them because they've gotten smart and they've just taken it to the internet, okay, which is a very good possibility. There should be one more pack back there. So, I see very few for sale by owner signs out there. But when the market's good, when do you think you're gonna see more FSBOs?
So it's market.
Spring? When the market's good, like now, because everybody can sell their house when it's good, right? Can you, one of the things that we as agents used to talk about is we can get more money for you. And I always thought that was a lot of crap, basically. Can we in some cases? Yeah, especially if the agent, or if the client doesn't know what they're doing, or the potential client. But I'm going off on a tangent here. What my big thing was when I was dealing with for sale by owners was not about I can put more money in your pocket. It was about security. If you didn't have your house listed and someone knocked on the door that you didn't know, would you let them into your house? You wouldn't, right? But because the next day you put a sign out there and that same person knocked on the door, would you let them into your house? Right? No different. Sign in the yard, same person. When I used to talk to for sale by owners, that's exactly what I used to talk about. You wouldn't let someone just come walking through your house. But now, because you have a sign in your yard, you don't know anything about that person. You can really play on it if the husband and wife are there. Right. Al, you know, when you're at work, do you want your wife to be showing around somebody in your house that you don't know? We live in a wacky world. And I'm telling you, you'd see people's faces would go blank. They don't think about stuff like that. So instead of, if you're going to work for sale by owners, don't talk about how much money you're going to save them. Go to the heart of something. Talk about security. I guarantee you that one will help you. Okay, I digress. All right. Assistance in developing, communicating, negotiating, presenting offers, counter offers, and related documents or notices until a purchase agreement or lease agreement is executed by all parties and all contingencies are satisfied or waived. After execution of a purchase agreement by all parties, assistance is necessary to complete the transactions under the terms specified in the purchase agreement. For a broker or associate broker who is involved in the closing of the real estate or business opportunity transaction, furnishing or causing to be furnished to the buyer and seller a completed detailed closing statement signed by the broker, associate broker, showing each party's all receipts and disbursements affecting that party. Okay, you guys be quiet for a second. Who's the broker here?
You are.
I said you be quiet. Go ahead, Kavita.
Yeah, and you're the broker of record.
Kavita is correct. Keller Williams is the broker, the entity. But since the entity can't talk or write, it comes down to me as the associate broker. Now, this is something, see, that never happened. I shouldn't say never. I'm trying to really enforce this more. We probably close 200 transactions a month. Out of those, there's probably 100 sales, listings a month. What is supposed to happen when it's a listing of ours at the closing? Or before the closing? It says so in this thing.
Providing the list of.
A closing statement. Who's supposed to sign the closing statement?
You are.
I am. I would bet out of 100 transactions a month that I'm supposed to sign, I might get 10. And that's probably a lot. Now, don't take that as I don't need to have it signed. Take that as you should have it signed. Okay? Now, those can be things that could come back and bite us all in the rear end down the road if we were ever to get audited. So, and the beauty of things now is you can email them to me or dot loop them to me and I can sign them.
So after closing, when we have the packet from title, we bring that to you?
No, that's
No?
too late.
Okay.
prior to closing.
Okay.
I'm supposed to review them. Back in the days of dinosaurs, prior broker that actually put the closing statement together. Now who puts the closing statement together? The title company does, on authorization from us. Now, remember, well, as of right now, today, what's today's date?
15th.
May 15th?
Yeah.
5/15? 5. Do you realize this whole week, the numbers were,
Yeah.
you can read them backwards and frontwards this whole week. There's two closing there's the closing statement and the HUD, okay? The HUD is a governmental form that mortgages. Now that's all changing come August 1st. That's why we're having this big powwow at some point that First Centennial will be putting on. I don't need to sign the HUD, I need to sign the real estate closing section. And you guys know the difference between the two?
One's really long.
That's an excellent answer, Dave, not quite what I was looking for. The one I have to sign, closing statement, deals strictly with the real estate costs, okay? Tax prorations, commissions, things like that. The HUD takes that and then puts what else in there?
Mortgage costs.
All the mortgage costs, okay? I couldn't sign something like that because I don't know what all the mortgage costs are, right? I have no idea what someone's getting raked over the coals on their mortgage, all right? So, but the real estate statement on a listing, the broker's supposed to sign it. So, little FYI.
So, people that aren't getting that form signed, are they signing it themselves, or they?
Oh, sometimes they sign it, sometimes they have First Centennial sign it, sometimes it doesn't get signed. And it is kind of funny. There's a Century 21 office, I can't remember which one it is, and I've talked to this lady numerous times, because every time we do a deal with her office and it's not signed, it takes her 2 or 3 weeks to catch up to it, but she'll call me and send me an email and say, hey, you guys didn't sign this statement. So for them to close out their records, they want to see our signed, which is good. It's actually, I don't have a problem with it, but they're the only other side that does it. So, yes, you should have me sign it. Michigan law requires real estate licensee who are acting as agents of sellers or buyers of real property to advise the potential seller or buyers with whom they work the nature of their agency relationship. So that's the second time on one page they talk about, you need to talk about agency, right? Seller's agent. A seller's agent under a listing agreement with the seller acts solely on behalf of the seller. A seller can authorize the seller's agent to work with sub-agents, buyer's agents, and transaction coordinators. A sub-agent of the seller is one who has agreed to work with the listing agent and who, like the listing agent, acts solely on behalf of the seller. Seller's agents and their sub-agents will disclose to the seller known information about the buyer, which may be used to the benefit of the seller. We'll come back to all that. Individual services may be waived by the seller through execution of a limited service agreement. Only those services set forth in paragraph 2 above may be waived in the execution of a limited service agreement. So if you flip back to page 1, remember how we said number 1, none of that can be waived. In number 2, B, C, and D can be waived. So my point has been, why don't they move A and E up to number 1? Wouldn't that make more sense? Put it into the category that can't be waived?
Right.
But this is the state, so we won't worry about that. All right, let's talk about seller's agents for a second. What's a sub-agent? Huh?
Someone who's co-listing the property?
Could be, but that's not what they mean in this scenario.
A buyer's agent that doesn't have agency with their buyer.
Someone else.
Kind of. Again, back in the day before 1995, how long have you been licensed?
I'm sorry,
How long have you been licensed?
4 years.
No, who's been licensed the longest? Maybe more than 4 years? Besides me. 1995, there was no such thing as buyer's agency nor dual agency. everybody represented the seller. Okay? I was working, Al came to me, Al's my brother here, and Al comes to me and he says, let's go look at houses. He's the buyer. Nowadays, I'd be representing him which way? Buyer's agent, right? Back then, I really wasn't representing him. I was representing the seller. Now, you can see that's kind of stupid, right? Who would, my fiduciary duty was supposed to be here, but truly, who do you think most people were, they were taking care of their family members or whatever. So NAR runs a survey back then and said, ask all the buyers, who's representing you? What do you think they all say? My agent. That wasn't the case. So along comes buyer's agency. I'm going to represent buyer, which also created then what? Dual agency. Everybody back then, if I worked for Century 21 and Al worked for Keller Williams, he was a sub-agent of mine, okay? His fiduciary duty was to my client, okay? When that buyer's agency came in, sub-agency kind of disappeared. It can still be offered out there, okay? And a lot of companies still offer it. We do not offer out sub-agency. So if you look at a listing of ours, do you guys know it on the MLS ticket where you know what you're getting paid, right? Mm-hmm. In the middle section it'll say SA. That's not seller's agent, okay? And a lot of people thought that was. That's sub-agent.
Why don't they have to disclose what the listing agent is getting paid on that?
On the profile sheet,
Yeah, on the MLS.
because it's nobody's business except at one point. And we've talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would make it better or worse, very honestly. Probably wouldn't be a bad thing, full disclosure. Then it says SA, and under ours it's going to say 0. Under most of them it's going to say 0. Then it's going to say BA. That's not the guy from,
BA Baracus.
yes,
A-Team.
A-Team. I could think of BA Brackets, I couldn't think of the show, the A-Team. This is bad. Some of these guys don't know what the A-Team is. Go watch Cartoon Network or whatever it is. But BA is buyer's agent. And then the other one is going to, does it say?
Yeah, it's got TC on there.
Is it TC? I'm drawing a complete blank. TC is transaction coordinator. Why don't we offer out sub-agency? Kavita knows. Go ahead, Kavita.
Because we don't know what their business practice is.
Exactly. If I'm offering out buyer's agency, if everybody here is a buyer's agent, and everybody here is a sub-agent, and I put up, here's a wall right in the middle. I know that these guys are, I don't want to say the competition, okay? But there's a wall clearly defined. I can't tell them anything confidential, right? Because if I do, what can they do?
Take it to the
They
client.
can take it to their client. If you guys are telling me you're a sub-agent, and I tell you something, can you go back to your client and talk about it? Who's your fiduciary duty to?
Client.
Whose client?
Yours.
My client. So can you go back to your client and talk to him? Or it wouldn't even be your client at that point.
Right.
It would be your, I'll use customer for lack of a better word, yeah. You can't do that, right?
Right.
What if you slip and say something? Who's in trouble?
You are.
You are.
Not just me. You guys are too.
Okay.
You guys are too. So the point is, if we don't offer out sub-agency, what's our mindset? We don't have to worry about it, right?
Right.
Right.
We know that everybody is not, we're not going to tell them anything confidential.
Right.
I don't know what your business practices are. I don't know anything about you guys. So why do I want to put myself and the company in a bad situation? So we do not offer out sub-agency at all. And I really don't want to offer out transaction coordinator, because at the end of the day, and we'll talk a little bit more about transaction coordinator, you're not talking about you being a transaction coordinator, you're talking about the other side. Why do you think, and we started this with, who who gets to choose how they're represented? Why would the client not want to have any representation? Because truly, if you're a sub-agent, right, does your customer have any representation? No. There's nobody watching out for their best interest. Why do you think that is? Because agents don't know how to explain agency, right? If I met you and I explain agency, and I understand it, and I can communicate it to you as a client, wouldn't you want some type of representation?
Yes.
It's kind of foolish if you didn't.
Yes.
Buyers don't want to do it because they don't want to get tied into this long buyer's agency contract, right? And I get that. But the first time I met you, if I said, hey, you don't know me from Adam, but I want you to sign a 6-month buyer's agency contract, what are you going to tell me to do? Pound sand, basically?
Right. Like, I've got a guy right now that he will not, he's also trying, or might, purchase some property with his father as well. So he wants to, like I tell him, well, let's put it as, let's exclude that property in the buyer agency contract. No. So every offer he's put in on a home, I have to do a new one for only that property.
Okay, which is actually a good thing and a bad thing, where I was going with this, and it worked out pretty good. If I don't know you, and you come to me, Lynn, and say, hey, I want to see this house on Main Street, if I explain agency to you, and then say, do you want to be represented, I would like to think you're going to say yes, right? So I say, okay. Lynn says, well, I really don't want to sign any long-term buyer's agency contract. I go, you know what, Lynn? That's great. You know, it's funny you say that. I'm not sure I want to be in a long-term contract with you either. So let's see what happens, and we'll try it out on this house. And if you're comfortable with it, then we'll look at signing a long-term contract. So you sign a buyer's agency contract for just that property. When I was serious but joking when I said that, because why do you want to go into a long-term contract if you don't know it, right? We always look at it as we want the buyer to sign something because that's good for us. Well, what might be good for us, you may find out down the road that you don't want to work with the dude, right?
I already don't.
Yeah, well no,
but he's
you're
a
right.
friend, so like I have to.
No, but that's the point.
But, yeah.
Why do you want to sign something if you're not
Right.
comfortable with them?
Right.
So
Yeah.
instead of looking at it, well, I got to get the buyer signed up to this thing long term because that's what we have to do. Forget that. The mindset needs to be changed to you guys. What do you want? And if you then, after you show this house, you want to go forward, then you talk to them. But you don't have to just stick it to somebody. But you can see there's ways around it. So if I explain agency properly, and the objection is I don't want to sign a long-term buyer's agency contract, are there ways around it?
Yes.
Lots of ways. So those are the things you need to do. But it's the client's decision, and we're going to talk a little bit about dual agency too. So sub-agency is not necessarily good. Can we all agree with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you don't want to get into sub-agency if you can avoid it. Any questions on any of that? Buyer's agency is the exact same thing as sellers, except you're representing who?
The buyer.
Can you see where it talked about, the top talked about information about the buyer you want to pass along? If you find anything about the buyer, you want to make sure you're passing it along to your seller, right? It's the same thing if you find something out about the seller. What might you find out about the seller?
The agent might
They're motivated.
have.
Their motivation. Maybe they're going through a divorce.
Lost
They
their
need to
job.
sell. They lost their job. Now, you as the agent really shouldn't find that out. At least not through the other agent, right?
Right.
You know, how about, there was a line about protecting, wasn't there, buyer's confidentiality or? buyer's confidentiality. One of the things I've talked about this is, you ever heard the term straw buyer? Al is a top flight athlete in the city. Who are you playing for these days, Al? Let's say he's a football player. Okay, and he's looking for a house. He goes in under his own name, what do you think the price of that house is gonna do? It's gonna go jacked up, right? So they use a straw buyer.
They do the same thing with like fast food companies and stuff, right?
Well, that's like, I used to use that, that example. I used to work for McDonald's. When McDonald's was looking to buy property, do you think if everybody knew that McDonald's was gonna buy that corner lot, that price was gonna go through the roof? They have their own real estate division. So, but if you go back to the scenario here, this straw buyer comes in, doesn't, and then after the deal's done, then it gets transferred into, his name. And same thing on the other end when you sell a house, So it's just a mindset. But the buyer's agency, there's times you have to protect your buyer's confidentiality, okay? What's a dual agent? And you three can't answer this.
Representing the seller and the buyer.
Are you representing them?
You're representing them.
You're bringing them together.
Representing is it's an interesting word, okay? Because you can't do full fiduciary duty, right? Okay, let me back up one, see how you guys answer this. Is dual agency good?
Yeah,
It's done.
Yeah,
yeah.
can be.
You can make the whole 6%.
That's the answer I was looking for. It's good for the agent.
That's right. Very good.
That's the agent that's what I was going for. It's good for the agent. Now let's try to go back to, and now I'll put the clarifier in there. Is it good for the client?
No.
No. It could be and it might not be.
Right.
There's a way to explain it. In a perfect world, dual agency isn't necessarily the best. How do you guys get into dual agency?
Listing a
buyers
home
to
and
your own
bringing a
listing.
buyer.
Hold on, go ahead.
Listing a home and bringing your own buyer.
All right, does anybody think differently on that? What if you list a home and Al brings a buyer?
Then it wouldn't be a dual, unless we're in the same team.
Pete
It
is.
wouldn't be a dual.
Same, if we're into the same broker.
Hold on, Lynn.
Oh,
Yeah, what? Why isn't that dual agency?
If they both work for Colorway, if you're the associate broker,
Mhm. They're both in our office here. Is that dual agency or not?
I'm gonna say no, but I don't know exactly why.
You guys are all right. However, you need to know why. That's the important part. Anybody know why? Kavita knows why. Kavita's on fire today. You guys should be thankful she's back there.
Because we are designated agency.
We are a designated agency office, okay? By being a designated agency office, it allows you guys to go about your business and represent your clients, okay? We went to designated agency right when I got my broker's license, which was a long time ago. 12 years ago, probably. And the reason we did, because at that time we were carrying close to 300 agents and probably 600 to 700 listings. So you think there was a really good chance that you guys were going to be in a dual agency situation? Right. Huge. So designated agency comes along and says, okay, if you do certain things, you guys as buyers, let me back up. Designated agency was put in place to eliminate, this is important, this is really one of the main things about designated agency. Designated agency was put in place to eliminate as many dual agency for agents as possible. Okay. Dave already answered this question. What does it do for me as the broker?
Put you on the bond.
What's that?
Put you in the middle. Because
Am I in dual agency if you guys are doing deals together?
You always are.
I am always in dual agency as the broker, okay? That aren't in dual agency, I'm in dual agency, okay? But you can see, from your point of view, it's a lot easier, right? You get to go on representing your client. So the only way you guys get into dual agency is what?
Listing and your own
You
buyer.
have both the listing and the buyer. When I started about saying, well, who gets to choose how they're represented, this is kind of where I was going with this. Let's say I'm one of you guys. I'm not the broker. Took up my broker hat. I have a house listed, and someone calls me up on the phone, says, I want to see your house. And this is where agents put themselves in trouble. Well, I can't represent you because my seller says I can't do dual agency. What's wrong with that whole scenario there? First of all, why do you think the seller doesn't want you to be in dual agency?
You explained it wrong.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, if you explain agency properly, it's not a big deal, okay? So when do you explain agency to your seller? Where we all started this, before any confidential information. So you're explaining dual agency. How do you explain dual agency? I keep it very simple. Dual agency is if I have a listing on your property and a buyer comes in and wants to see it, and I have them under a buyer's agency contract, we are in a dual agency situation. What that means is what you tell me is confidential, Al, and what you tell me is confidential. If we're going back and forth, Al, and let's say your house is listed for $200,000, and the seller says I want to make an offer for the buyer says I want to make an offer for $160, but I'm willing to go up to $180. I can't tell you that. If you tell me that I'm willing to take $190, or go back to me at $190, but I'm willing to take $180, you wouldn't want me to tell them that, would you? Right. So you can see what you tell me stays on this side of my brain and what they tell me stays on this side of the brain, and I keep it confidential. Yes?
I mean, that's how it should work every time. It's just agents aren't, I mean, I feel.
Well, now here's the thing though. You
Not-
gotta be careful. Let's stay here for 1 second, I'm gonna wrap this up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you explain it that way, at the beginning, do you think Al's gonna have a problem with that? He shouldn't. Where the issue becomes, potentially, is I don't explain dual agency to Al. I call Al up and go, hey, we got an offer on your house today. And by the way, we're in a dual agency situation, Al. And Al's gonna say, what's that? Well, really, I can't, you're losing some of your bargaining power, not bargaining power. I can't represent you totally because I've got this client over here. Timing is everything. When you tell somebody something is as important as what you're telling them. Tell it to them at the beginning, and I always make sure that on dual agency form, or down here, I will put possible. Why do I put that? So I know I explained it to them. So now when that situation comes up and I have that offer, I'll go back to Al. Great news, we've got an offer on your property, and I've got the buyer. Do you remember when we talked about dual agency when we listed your property? Those people don't want to lie and say, I can't remember. They're going to say, yeah, I remember. Right? They don't want to look stupid. So, and you've already explained it to them. So it's a non-issue, okay? But if you don't know how to, this is what I started out saying. If you can't explain agency and understand it, this is where the problems arise. Now, going back to Dave, you're saying it should be that way all the time, that the confidentiality part of it, or?
Yeah, even when it's two different agents, that's
But
still
here's the
how it should
thing,
work.
if an agent slips and says something to you, what is your fiduciary duty?
Take it to your client.
To tell your client, right?
But
So if you don't tell your clients, there's an issue, okay? Now, do they? I gotta tell you something. There's a fine line in this business when you're negotiating back and forth with other agents. What do you think they'll take? I don't know. But does that always come out, the I don't know? No, somebody will say, you know what? Bring me something, bring me 170, let's see what happens. Now, if I say, bring me 170, does that mean that my client is gonna take that?
No.
Yeah, I mean, you're not telling them, I'm just saying, you know what? I don't know, bring me 170, let's see what they do.
I can tell you they take the asking
Yeah,
price.
right. And if you're in a dual agency situation, okay, and you're getting ready to write an offer for somebody, and the buyer says, what should I write the offer for? What do you think they'll take? What's your answer?
Asking price.
I know they'll take 200. That's what it's listed for, right?
Make an offer.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to come back to that. If an agent or if a client asks you that on a RE/MAX offer, okay, that you're a RE/MAX house that you're writing an offer on, and they say that, well, let's do the comps and see what it's worth, okay? Can you run comps in a dual agency scenario? And you guys don't get to talk here. You have two options here. Actually, you have more than that. But I'm going to give you the yes and no. Can you run comps in a dual agency situation for the buyer?
Yes.
I'm gonna say no, because it could go against your seller.
All right, we have the yeses over here. Who's going with yeses?
I'm gonna go with yes.
I'm
Why
with
can't
yes.
you use other
Hold on.
properties?
Who's going with no?
I wanna go with maybe because they both made a good point.
It all
No,
makes
she made a
sense,
good
yeah.
point and so did you,
All
so,
right, you guys want the real answer?
yeah.
Yes, you can run comps, but they better be the exact same comps you gave the seller. If you didn't,
I have heard that.
okay, if I run comps, you're the buyer, and I tell you it's worth 180, and I gave her comps 3 days ago and told the comps are worth 200,
Yeah.
I got a problem.
Right.
Right? Now, here's where it used to get a little trickier. Back when the market was tanking, prices were going like this, right? I list Lynn's house in December, tell her it's worth 200. I don't see Lynn for another 2 months because the worst part of a listing is when you have no information to give to the client.
Right.
So what do you tend to do? You shy away, and the relationship deteriorates really quickly. But what ended up happening is, by the end of February, her $200,000 house is worth what?
160.
It wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, it was plummeting quick. But yeah, it might have been worth 180. But I never went back to Lynn and gave her a new CMA. And this is where agents back in the day were screwing their clients. And I gotta tell you something, I'm surprised there weren't lawsuits by sellers, okay? Because if we weren't doing our job back then, guess where we were putting our people, our sellers, in the position to get foreclosed on, right? That if I had sold my house over here, I might have been able to walk out of it. But because agents weren't responding as quick and giving them different new CMAs, there were problems. All right, so yes, you can give comparables, but they better be the exact same ones. And if you don't, you got a problem. We're going to be out of here in a second. I'm not going to finish this, obviously, today. So you need to understand, okay, one last thing about dual agency. Do you think if you explained it the way I did to you guys, it's going to solve, most people are going to be okay with that?
Yeah.
95% of them are. Then you always have the guys that are just a little bit more difficult. Special, I like that. I like that, special. So how do you overcome that last one? If I sit here and say, I've done my job with it and they still, I don't want to do a dual agency.
Do you want to sell your house?
That's a good line. But here's a better line. I want you to listen to this. And you got to take them down this path. Al, why do you want to do a dual agency, but I'm listing his house. We've already agreed to that, okay? Why did you choose me, Al?
Choose to work with you?
Yeah.
To sell a house.
Well, you were highly recommended.
Trust
I'm
you.
sure there's a lot of agents out there that come highly recommended. Any other reason, Al? your answer to sell the house, I could go down that path too. There's a lot of agents out there that can sell the house. But why me?
Trust.
Okay, there's probably a lot of trustworthy agents out there.
Knowledge?
Can't say no, no.
Knowledge?
They like
A lot of knowledge. What's that?
They like your personality.
Nobody likes my personality. What I want them to say is you're the best person for the job, right? And I'm gonna take them down that path. So Al, you think I'm the best person for the job?
Yes.
Okay. You know what, you're right, I am. Okay, you know what I found out over the last 23 years of doing this business? That most problems aren't between buyers and sellers. Most problems are with agents. Not getting in contact with you, not following up on things. Guess what? When we do this dual agent, if we do a dual agency deal, unless I get into a fight with myself, we're not gonna have that problem, are we? There's only one person here to make sure the deal goes smoothly. Nobody, you want them to say, you're the best person for the job, right? Nobody's gonna pick the second best person, right? So if you go down that path, I pretty much will guarantee you that 5% that doesn't want to, you need a little bit more, the special people, even the special people at that point will understand where you're going. And it's true. I mean, I truly believe that most problems are with other agents. And you guys, the longer you're in that, you'll know that. My job, what I'm trying to get you guys to realize is don't be the other agent. I mean, don't be the bad agent. The more training you get, you'll be better off at it. All right, we will finish this up next week, and we'll finish up buyer's agency.
Thank you.
All righty,
Thank
see
you.
you guys later.
Too early in there, coffee through it.
Question. We had 2 people that come to me with the short bid. Several houses. One's on the east side, one's up the couple. And doing a short sale, putting out the commissions, it's one that's up in the, I did the count last night, probably worth 30,000. She owes 60.
In Detroit,
In Detroit.
one of the few places they'll do them. I mean, the good areas are not doing it. I mean, banks aren't doing it. Because they figure, you know what, might be worth this today, but another couple, in a year or two, it's gonna be worth where it needs to be. I just did one in Detroit on the east side, on Lubbock. Closed on it. Almost the same scenario. I think he owed 80. I sold it to him a long time ago. But he paid this, then refinanced it up here, and then got hold. And they did it. And, oh, here's the best part of it, Al. Not only did they do it, the bank, they gave him $5,000 to go away.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's enough for commissions in, but 1,000 apiece? Or half,
Yeah.
50/50 split on whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
50/50.
put in the remarks, though, commission to be split 50/50. Yeah.
On final agreement.
Yeah. Because you don't want to get hosed and then end up eating it down the road.
So, is it possible though, say the bank says they're gonna pay 3%, or are they just not gonna,
That's a distinct possibility, they may do that.
So I did not possibly want to put in 1,000 each agent, or with the negotiation?
How much is it, 30?
30,000. With 30,000, it's $900, right?
Yeah.
So would it be possible the bank would say, well, the negotiator would say we gotta give the agents 1,000 apiece?
I would hold firm on it. Are you gonna turn it over to Linnell to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I would turn it over and say, you're more than likely you're either gonna get Bunny or Amanda and just see what they say. Or just tell them, you're really looking for $1,000 here, each.
Right. And then when that happens, then those commissions negotiated through, and the bank winds up paying the commissions?
Mhm.
Okay. So there's the seller
Sellers are paying nothing.
paid nothing. Okay.
Good. I'm Keith.
By the way, twice.
Chicoias? Okay. Yeah, you can turn that off. I didn't.
Is it still going?
Oh, yeah.
Will you do me with my huge favor? We just run this up to Kristen or Carolyn.
We have a one.
Can you walk with me? Because I gotta get up from my office. So, brand new business.